a little bit?
Yeah, it all basically comes down to Veritas.
Oh God, don't even start. 4,
3,
2.
1. All right, so this is something I think we should elaborate on because it's an inside joke and we haven't elaborated on, but the everything is arbitrary inside joke. Where did that originally come from? And can we elaborate on it for the audience so they don't understand or they understand the background on that? Audience, we have a very famous 3-hour conversation about
The conversation.
Objective truth.
Conversation.
yeah, about objective truth.
Where I think we
nature of
all
it.
just ended the conversation so angry. It's like, we're like, we don't want this trip to continue anymore.
And then it became the
Okay,
Veritas conversation.
Yeah, I think everything is arbitrary actually came before the Veritas conversation.
It
think
did.
everything is arbitrary came from the fact that like we would just have arguments and then counter arguments and it would just be nonstop. So we would just end arguments by being like, well, everything's arbitrary anyway.
Yeah.
But there has to be what no, it was
Well, I disagree with that.
No, so I do remember where it came from originally because we were having a conversation where I think there was some kind of argument over what form objective truth takes or something like that.
I think
And
that's
then-
the very
and then-
base is
Yeah.
subjective versus objective truth. And Kitty Cat was and I don't know, probably still is of the belief that is your belief that there is only subjective truth?
I have not really thought about this for a long time.
I think the discussion was that you.
I think.
Yeah, you don't believe in objective truth, which would mean everything has to be subjective. And then
Right.
my belief was there has to be objective truth. And I probably early on, well, I definitely I still also believe that now that there has to be some objective truth, but I also know that there is, I mean, there's such thing as subjective truth. I may have been a little bit more extreme in the past in the terms of like I was saying like everything boils down to an objective truth, which I still kind of believe in a grand scheme of things, but there are like offshoots of it, like what's your favorite color and all that stuff. Like you can't really objectify that per se, but I mean, I guess that's the thing though. It's like you theoretically still probably could, but so then we just kind of start our ending arguments. Well, everything's arbitrary and everything's subjective anyways.
Yeah, and that was
Turkey, was there like an objective truth that you were saying that everything came down to?
Well, my base argument for against subjectivism is if you believe that subjective truth is true, then you're objectifying subjectivism.
Right. So, yes. That makes me a little crazy to hear that because that was a common argument that we would come up against.
Yeah, because if you're stating that subjective truth is true, then you're saying that's objectively true. So that's where my objective truth. You have to have something objective. Otherwise, you can just say whatever you want, and then it's all meaningless. Which I mean, that could be.
But then the restriction on it comes that our ability to perceive the objective truth is limited by our own subjectivity. As a sort of opposite side of the coin in terms of there must be objective truth, that is only according to our subjective perceptions, which very much like you're talking about favorite colors or perhaps taste, where you can say when you taste something, is there an objective taste to it if that taste is in reference to the subjects in defining it. And then you get to the problem of even mathematics when you're saying something along the lines of there is one atom or something like that, or there is one subatomic particle. We are unable to observe the highest and lowest units within the universe in a way that we can perceive easily, if that makes sense.
Right.
So we cannot even say, you can say, oh, there's one apple, but the apple is just kind of a construct around a whole bunch of other things. And then you can ask the question, well, if the apple is an inch in size or something like that, then is it more of an apple than it is like an apple that's 2 inches in size and that sort of thing? And then it's just it becomes like the objective truth is definitional, and we cannot even observe the highest and lowest levels to which, especially the lowest level, which defines all of those constructs. So there's, yeah.
That goes back to the whole bottom line of, well, if you're saying that we like the objective truth that we're talking about is subjectively defined, it's still assuming that there's you know what I mean? Like everything that we're saying is we're still assuming there's an objectivity to it.
That there's an answer. Yeah.
Yeah. So
But Turkey, wouldn't everything be negated then if the one subjective truth is that, or sorry, if the one objective truth is that everything is subjective, then that just negates itself. If everything's subjective, then so is that truth.
Right. So that's where we reach an impasse, because it's negating on both sides.
That's when everything is arbitrary comes in.
Right.
Yeah, which was initially just a joke, but that's also, it could be a way of saying that there is no inherent objective or subjective truth.
But exactly. So, and you can interpret in either way, because if you say there is no objective truth, that's an objective truth statement.
Yeah.
But if you say everything is but if you say, well, hold on. If you I'm still I was thinking of something to advocate for subjectivity, because it also is negating in objectivity too, because if you're saying everything is subjective, which is an objective truth, then something has to be, I mean, bottom line is one of them has to be wrong, which again, even it's saying that, you're saying something has to be right and something has to be wrong, which again boils down to there has to be an objectivity to it. So that's where I come in with my viewpoint. But
Yeah. And observationally, we still lack, I think the limiting factor that I see, if you're using perspectivism, or you're assuming that our perceptions are representative to finding truth, the problem with that is, number one, we're still very limited in evaluating the highest and lowest levels of our universe, as mentioned. Like there may be things smaller than subatomic particles, or there may be, for example, truths that are imperceivable because of our limitations.
Just because we're limited doesn't mean that there isn't an objective truth behind everything.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that, but it's just it's tough. Even if there is an objective truth, how do you properly perceive that with the limitations of the human mind, or our limitations in general? Or how can you pull conclusions when you haven't seen the whole story too, which is
right. And that is a question I am not answering with my argument. My argument is that there just is an objective truth. I am not answering how we can figure it out or whatever. I'm just saying you have to agree that there is one first. Like that's the base. And then you can start figuring out how to find it, which I think ultimately you kind of hit on.
It could prove itself wrong in a way, though.
You have to have something that can be like you have to have
Isn't that the same thing as the issue of saying everything I say is false? Isn't it sort of an extension of that?
Right. That's like if you say everything I say is false,
it's a conundrum.
Yeah.
A paradox.
But to be fair, I'll give fairness to the other side. All of this is assuming logic and what's the word I'm trying to say? Contradictions are a rule. You know what I mean? So if contradictions cannot happen, then like we are just kind of assuming that they cannot happen.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Because we're using our limited logic skills, and in our limited logic like verbiage, contradictions just it doesn't make sense because it doesn't fit with our logic. But in a world where contradictions can exist, then that boils back down to everything's arbitrary, and also not arbitrary, and somewhat arbitrary, and mildly arbitrary, and moderately arbitrary, and hugely arbitrary. Because every scenario, it's like a parallel universe almost in a way, argumentation. Like everything can happen all at once. Both it's like the constant and its opposite.
Yeah, and I think it's just to go back to the crux of this, because we're kind of getting a little bit in the weeds on this.
Our viewers are like, what the heck just
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah, these are some of the conversations we get into that get a little, they never seem to go anywhere, but they're always kind of interesting thought experiments. And that's
It
where
was
this
a like 4-hour conversation during the Veritas
on
chat.
campus.
Yeah, we never really come out with a conclusion. We kind of just waffle around, which we can't imagine anyone likes this, but we might as well put it out there and see who responds to it, just out of curiosity. But
Arbitrary and Veritas.
yeah, but essentially the everything is arbitrary came as sort of a joke argument to the argument, oh, there's objective truth and there's subjective truth, as a sort of joke argument that like, oh, you're both wrong, and it's just kind of a troll response to it. So when we say everything is arbitrary, we don't mean that. It's more just saying as a joke, like, oh yeah, everything can be right and wrong at the same time if you say everything's arbitrary, and it's kind of a joking concept sort of thing.
It would be interesting for
It's
whoever.
also.
Oh, sorry, kitty cat.
Go ahead, Turkey.
No.
Well, I'll jump in and just say
Okay.
there's some interesting stuff happening in the question of in how things are perceived in this issue too.
I was just going to say that it's also oddly comforting, at least to me, to be like, well, everything's arbitrary anyway. You know, take some of the pressure off.
There's a comfort in it. And we were even doing that thought process because we were both saying like, well, if everything's like objective, there could be like a scary universe, and then but also if everything's subjective, it's kind of scary universe. But it is interesting to take things to the extreme. Again, my current viewpoint is I feel like I'm not saying a lot. All I'm saying is that there has to be some objective truth somewhere. Like I'm just making a very vague statement. But if you don't believe in anything objective, I still have a hard time finding agreement with that. But that, I mean, doesn't mean that I'm right. But
there's also the pragmatic side of it too, where does not believing in anything just naturally deflate any push for human initiative too? I mean, that's kind of secondary to the truth of it, I suppose, because it would be, is the reality so grim that you should make another reality, you know, the ignorance is bliss argument and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
all very valid questions, but not the root of this particular argument.
Yeah, they just sort of stem out of it.
Yeah.
I think that
and
part
maybe this can be a topic for a future episode, but I've been reading about psychedelics like LSD and mushrooms and MDMA and stuff like that. Really interesting stuff that I think could contribute to our conversations about reality and consciousness. Yeah, there's a ton of research about it being like, these are being like tested and researched for like PTSD and depression and anxiety and eating disorders and OCD, and lots of like really good results so far. But yeah, all about like altered states of consciousness that I think would maybe be an interesting spin on our conversations about the nature of reality.
Yeah, I'm especially interested in the response to it because, as you mentioned, Turkey, it is, even if you assume there's an objective truth, there's still the question of applicability and observability and applicability to one's life. And that's the part I get interested in, mostly because I think because of the limitations of our human perception on such an issue. It's not to say we shouldn't go after it, but it is a limiting factor for me. So oftentimes I just skip right ahead to the applicability on human behavior, I guess, which I find really interesting. And I think it goes into what you're saying as well, Kitty Cat, I know that's such an awkward thing to say as a transition, but it's interesting in terms of how people can observe, you know, what they observe with psychedelics sort of thing, and what if and what they're perceiving in their head is so different and yet seems so real. And there's a question of what's to say that, that reality is not completely different than the way we normally observe it, sort of thing. And interesting questions on that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. If you have any
I
thoughts,
think it'd be an interesting topic.
yeah, please comment below and tell us if you're team objective truth or team subjective truth or team everything is arbitrary and also not arbitrary.
Well,
I'm team everything is arbitrary.
Yeah.
In the end.
I'm team all of the above.
I don't know where I fall on this.
I don't even think that could be an answer.
Well, if you're saying it can't be an answer, then I guess there's an objective truth there. I'm just kidding.
Oh gosh, I knew
this
was gonna get weird, but
Veritas.
Yeah, Veritas.
That's like Family Guy Roundhouse.
Yeah, for anybody who is listening, Veritas is the Harvard slogan that launched this entire conversation. Because I think we had observed a Harvard shuttle going by, and we were like, oh really? Their slogan is Veritas? Like, what type of truth are they talking about?
Yeah. Harvard, they just think they know it all. Just kidding.
If only that shuttle hadn't gone by, that would have been a very different meal.
No, it's because I think it's because Harvard. We were at Harvard's campus when we were talking about that, and there was just tons of Harvard stuff. But I don't know if it was the shuttle.
We were at Harvard's campus, and there was a ton of Harvard stuff.
Dumb, deep conversations.
We
naturally end up going there.
Yeah, deep conversations, but with also stupidity.
Which is basically the entire basis of our friendship. So.
Exactly. That is what our friendship is built on.
Pretty much.
And with that, should we end? What maybe this will be the ending of the podcast.
Let's be friends.
Yeah, let's be friends.
Let's be friends.
that could also be the title.
Yeah, we'll find a title out of this somehow. We'll cut through it and make it work. I'm sure it'll be fine. We have.
Yeah.
You know.
All right. Good job, everyone. That's a wrap.
Thanks for taking a ride on Spaceship Piff. If you're interested in another trip, check out one of our other videos. And consider leaving a comment on our most recent podcast about how you paid it forward.